Hello and welcome back to the Genesis Designs and Modelcraft bench, and here we are to start off with part 4 of the Tonka build. And finally, after what seems like actual years, we're starting to get to where we can put some paint on this thing. So I thought I'd do a quick run through of the little bits and pieces I've done since the end of construction video, part 3, just to show sort of the final throes of prep and how roundabout it is. It does tend to, it can be quite a convoluted process, and with a build like this where there's been so much modification and filler work, let's face it, it can be a bit of a back and forth sort of a job. So as you can see, the model has quite a blotchy appearance now. That's because I've been using various different primers to ensure that I was happy with all of these surfaces. Make sure the sanding marks were gone and there's no sort of errant pinholes or that kind of thing. The primers I have used up to now are the Ammo of MIG one shot in the dark grey. That's the dark grey that you can see. And I've also used some Tamiya fine grey primer, which is the light grey, and in fact is virtually the same colour as the kit plastic. So topped it with Ammo one shot. It's best used after an initial primer because its adhesion to bare plastic is not, it's adequate. It is adequate, but it is not as good as the likes of Tamiya fine grey or indeed Halfords. So basically got the fin on, got all of that sorted out, all the join areas on there, finished all of that, then had to re-scrub and re-rivet most of this sort of lower area because I'd lost a lot of it. Same down here, did a lot of reworking of stuff that I'd already reworked once, which is always fun and literally one of my favourite things to do. Said no one ever. Okay, got that sorted out, fitted the spoiler, and there's a little panel there from foil on the left hand wing. Fitted the air-to-air refuelling assembly, that is obviously in a closed position. There are a lot of photographs, online photos of Gulf War 1 aircraft that actually had these opened on the ground, which I don't think is technically normal, but obviously standard operating procedures change over the years. So the pod under the nose is fitted as well, targeting pod or whatever it is. Spent a bit of time fairing this transparent part in nicely. It's masked off with the kit supplied masking pieces. There's actually a small domed lens inside which I've sprayed with transparent purple, which you can kind of see to represent the actual sort of targeting head in there. Underneath those vents that were made in the last video, those are fitted in the relevant positions, and essentially at that point you can smash a bit of primer on. And what I've done is I've just primed sort of areas, rubbed them down, made sure I'm happy, and gone backwards and forwards doing that 2, 3, 4 times. It is a nose, not gonna lie, it's a ball ache, but the only way that you're going to guarantee a finish that you're 100% happy with is if you put the effort in now. There's no two ways about it. So the model now is at a point where I can head off into the bathroom and scrub it with some salt and water, because salt's not going to do anything, is it? Just to get some of this sort of sanding dust and sludge and what have you out of some of these panel lines rather than re-scribing them yet again. As you can see, the canopies are fitted. Now this one has had no extra work done to it yet. I have masked it myself rather than use the kit supplied masks because I don't want to diss Eduard. They're a company that I have a lot of time for, but their masks never seem to fit just so for me. So I did it myself. You already know that we've done some work on the windscreen, but these are just fitted with microscale crystal clear, this stuff. There goes the repeater already. Just fitted with white glue. Any sort of PVA type glue will do for that, because all we want to do is hold them in place temporarily. They'll be getting pulled off once the paint is on. And I've fitted a Master Models pitot probe. You could fit that after paint. It did fit pretty well, but I didn't want any sort of a join there. So I fitted it with super glue kind of squeezed out around it, let that dry and then sand it down, and there shouldn't be any joint there. So the next stage, once I've scrubbed it and I'm happy that I've got as much of the sanding remnants off as I can, I'll spray the model with this Mr. Paint Dark Sea Grey. There's not a lot left in this jar, but there is enough, and I'll spray the whole thing with that. That will act, because I want the camouflage colours underneath on the canopy, and that will act as a kind of ground coat effectively. It's not a primer as such, that work is done. It will act as a ground coat. I can check for a final time that I'm happy with all the surfaces, and if I'm not, I can sand it back and reapply this as many times as I need to do with no real penalty. There isn't a lot of build in this. If you kept doing it with primer over and over again, you would just gradually lose all your surface detail, and obviously I don't want that. So the next phase of the primer sand repeat will be carried out with this Mr. Paint Dark Sea Grey, which is MRP 113. And I'll show you where I'm going to be heading with the paintwork. Oh, actually, before I do that, here's my card. You see, I said it, everything goes round and round and back to front and backwards and forwards. What I tend to do at this stage is make myself a little list of things that I remember that I need to do before I get heavily into getting the paint on there, because it is very easy to forget, because you do get excited about, well, hey, I'm going to get some paint on it, and forget to fit your P-toe, or forget to prep your pylon holes or something, and the next thing you know, you've got your beautifully painted model and you're having to have at it with a drill again. So I make myself little lists and I cross things off as I go. Anyway, I digress. Paintwork then. I've had a little play with the tail planes to test out what I want to do with it. Obviously, as with most people, I suppose, I develop a concept or an image in my mind of how I want the model to look quite early on. And obviously in this case, and many others to be fair, that is allied to some real life reference photos of the actual aircraft. So these aircraft was early on in the aircraft's career, and they were painted in the dark sea grey, dark green camo. When they went out to the Gulf, they were over painted with a semi-permanent, it's not completely unpermanent, but a semi-permanent desert yellow colour or desert pink. And the net result of that is that they got very dirty very quickly because the desert paint was very matte, but also the desert paint wore off quite well. So they ended up with this fabulous patchy finish of dark and light bits of paint and weathering and mess. So the first thing I wanted to do was actually paint the camouflage colours. So that's what I've done here. And this has been coated with X22 clear to protect it, because Tamiya acrylics, if you're using a hairspray type chipping method, can be a little bit prone to coming off with it. So seal it in and protect it with X22, and that's what this is. And then from there, I mixed myself a desert pink colour, here it is, and applied some chipping fluid. I used this one. I do have hairspray, but I've used this time. This is Ammo of Mig chipping fluid, and it's called Scratches Effects. Some good England there. And I've applied that over the camo, a couple coats, and then I've applied the desert pink. I'm going to come up closer and I hope this comes out on camera. I've done some shading in Nadgery with the colour as I've gone along, and as you see around the leading edge there's some chipping. I chipped the paint with my trusty chipping brush, but I've actually oversprayed it very lightly with various bits of the shading, and I've done that to tone the effect down so that it's not so in your face. I can at any point either re-chip that a little bit or touch it in with a brush, because I've got an outline to work to. And I have to say, as a basic sort of non-weathered finish and surface, I am quite happy with that as a colour. I think it works. If you're wondering what the colour is, here it is. It's based on Tamiya Desert Yellow XF59. Mixed it myself. I added a lot of white. It was some gloss white and some matte white, because frankly because I'm running out of matte white and everyone's out of stock, but also because the addition of the gloss helps it to spray a bit more nicely. And then there's a touch, and I'm talking about a touch of X7 red and XF3 bright yellow in there, which just gives it that kind of pinkishness, which tends to lose when you put the white in. So that's what I've used. That's what's in here. Is it 100% correct? It's hard to say. You look at photographs and you know they all tend to look a little bit different. I've got a load of reference images that I've downloaded to my phone. I'll just show you here, and you can see in each one of those pictures the colour looks different. So, you know, pay your money and all that. By the time it's all weathered and filthed up, the actual colour is somewhat moot, to be fair. But that's my plan. This has actually also been treated to a coat of VMS matte varnish. We've already talked about VMS satin varnish in other projects. I've actually got some matte here as well. This has been treated, that's what this finish is, and after it was dry I rubbed it ever so slightly with a bit of dry Trizact, and that's why it's got that very slight sheen on it, and that's just to take, excuse me, any roughness out of it, which it's done admirably. It's left a nice finish, and this will now be suitable to be oil painted, further shading, other weathering, panel line washes if you want them. I'm not going to do that, but this is a prime surface for all of those effects to go onto. Okay then, so we've got some grey paint on this thing now. This is, as I said before, I think Mr. Paint Dark Sea Grey. So this is part of the camouflage, obviously. As I said, I didn't want to use primer because I don't want too much build on this. And what I've done is I've put a couple of coats down, just enough to pretty much get coverage. It's not full coverage, but it's close enough at this stage. Now if I just bring this up a little closer, hopefully, there we go, we catch the light there. Now you may, I can't see it on the small monitor, but you may be able to see some very light sanding textures in that paint finish. Perhaps what you definitely can do is hear that slight texture that this has got. If I rub my fingers across it. So the next stage now, which I'll just show you quickly, is to grab the Trizact. If you don't have Trizact, just use something similar, so anything around about, I'm going to say 2000 grit plus. Foam back's better because you're less likely to cut through it. So a bit of water, and I'm just going to give it a quick rub. There are a lot of good reasons for doing this. I know we're not going for a gloss on this model, but we're going to have a multi-layer paint job. So the smoother you are at each layer, the better, because if you imagine this texture that's sat here, I just leave it, put some green on it, the green goes over that texture, and I just leave it, plus the texture that's in the green paint inevitably, plus the overspray. Then I seal it in with clear, and then I'm trying to put desert sand on it and chip it, and you start to think, actually, so I'm not taking a lot of paint off here, but listen, virtually silent. If I bring that up to the light now, you can see the difference. Smooth sheen. Now if I look really carefully, I can still see some slight sanding marks, but I'm not remotely concerned because I'm going to put some more grey on. When this is all sanded down with Trizact, I will put another coat of grey on just to make sure there's no actual bare areas. Then I'll be putting green on it, then I'll be putting clear on it. At each layer it will get hit with this again. And then it'll have the desert sand, etc, blah blah blah, but ultimately we're going to end up with a matte finish as we have here, and there is absolutely no hint of any sanding marks in this finish, whereas there are in this. So I know for a fact that the process I'm going to follow is going to eliminate these very minor marks, and that's why we do testing at the end of the day. So here we go, just working around the model slowly, methodically, carefully with a wet Trizact, just taking that texture out We're going from that to that. And here we are, all grey. So all rubbed down, touched up where necessary, rubbed down again. Rinse and repeat, many times as you need to. Get this stage right and you're home, it's plain sailing from here on in. Once you're happy with this finish, you don't need to worry about it anymore because obviously it'll transmit all the way through. So the next step is to add the green camouflage. Obviously this is going to be a desert finished jet, but the desert paint was put over the top of the grey and green camouflage and chipped and peeled off really quite readily. So I need the camouflage, needs a strong word. I want the camouflage underneath it to give it that sort of, so that I can just chip wherever I want and the colours will be there and I don't have to think about it anymore. So I'm using this for the colour plan. Obviously the kit doesn't have the camouflage pattern in it because it's only meant for a desert aircraft. This is an ancient aero guide. This is aero guide number 4, Panavia Tornado GR1 Mark 1. And although it's all black and white, there are some pretty decent useful pictures in here, to be honest. It's not a bad little pamphlet. If you can find one, it won't cost a lot either, but there you go, that's got the camouflage patterns in it. So what I'm going to do now is just start getting some of these green patterns marked out on the aircraft. Now there's lots of ways of doing this. You can mask it if you want, you can use blue tack or whatever. In my experience of seeing real aircraft with camouflage on them back at Cosford, they were all hand sprayed demarcations, but quite tight, quite neat. I have seen photographs which suggest masking on some aircraft, but I think that would be outside of the norm. So hand sprayed it is. Now if this were going to be finished in the green grey camo, I'd use the fine line airbrush to do this, but it's not. It's going to be over painted, so this doesn't really matter all that much in truth. So I'm just going to use the Revolution, and in here I have, this is straight Tamiya XF81, thinned down probably around 60-40, 60% thinners, with a mixture, get your head around this, a mixture of Mr. Colour Thinner and IPA. So let's have a little go with this. I'm not going to mark it out, I'm literally just going to draw it on as I go and fill it in, and I'll just film this for a few moments because it's going to get boring very quickly, plus also I don't really like the way the sound comes through when I start spraying. So here we go. Just turning the pressure down a bit. Completely by ear. We draw a line in where we want the camouflage pattern to start, like so, and another one where we want it to finish, like so, and then just fill it in. No need for any trickery or nonsense. I'm just going to move it off the book, just filling it in. First coat on, nice and patchy. Just give it a quick blow with air only, just to knock the solvents out. part. Done that wrong. There we go, that's the two areas on this wing done. Now, clearly this isn't entirely accurate, and you know what, it really doesn't matter, because very, very little, almost none of this will actually be seen when we're done. And if I bring this up a bit closer, you can see that that's a relatively loose sprayed demarcation. So I'm going to show you top tip number 321. Good old Trizac, won't go anywhere without it. I'm going to rub across what I've just sprayed really gently, plenty of water, and what the Trizac will do, remember this grey paint has been flattered already and is perfectly smooth, so what the Trizac will do is pick up that little bit of overspray that makes this demarcation quite soft. I need a fresh bit of tissue so it's not going to damage my finish. Hey presto, super neat demarcations, easy as you like. There you go. I shall continue and finish this and I'll be back anon. There you go then, camo done. It does take a little while, as with everything like this, but I continue to spray with that. That was Tamiya XF81 dark green, RF dark green, to get this camouflage pattern on, and then I did some very tricksy masking around the front here to put this black on, which, you know, you could do it after the brown has gone on as well if you wanted to, but I just felt like doing it now. Obviously I will now have to reverse mask that when I put the brown on, but it's no biggie. So once the green was on and I treated it with the Trizac as I went through, I have painted the whole thing with a single coat, just one, of good old X22 clear. So this is Tamiya's acrylic gloss. It's thinned with the Mr. Colour thinner, and the thinning ratio ranges from probably 90% thinner right down to as low as maybe 60% thinner, but in truth very rarely that thick. I use it very, very thin indeed, and then you get this beautiful smooth finish that you can see here. Now, a couple of points I just wanted to make with this. Notice the difference in finish between the green areas and the grey areas, the gloss level. I just wanted to remark on that because it really illustrates the reason I've glossed this at all. I'm going to go from here and I'm going to add chipping fluid or maybe hairspray, and then I'm going to add the desert sand paint, and then I'm going to chip it. So this Tamiya acrylic, it's pretty decent, it sticks, it's reasonably robust, but under that regime you are in truth fairly likely to be taking this off as well. So to protect it, I've added this X22, and with it being so thin, the thinners will penetrate right through that green paint, and literally the green paint soaks it up, and that's why you see that gloss difference, because that Tamiya acrylic is just that much more porous than the Mr. Paint Dark Sea Grey is. The Mr. Paint Dark Sea Grey doesn't need the protection, but the Tamiya acrylic, in my opinion, does. Your mileage may vary, but here, this is my channel, we speak my truths. That's why the X22 is on here, and I think this just graphically represent that difference. The gloss level just shows you where that XF81 has soaked up that paint, and so now effectively, because it's so thin, this has almost become a lacquer paint really. The front, the nose, the radome was done with LP5 lacquer paint, nothing special there. Show you the belly. And the other point I wanted to make was I showed you earlier with the Trizac, this really old worn piece, rubbing over that camouflage to give the better edge. You see it again here. Now that only works because this surface was so smooth already. If you haven't been smoothing your finish through every phase of your paintwork, if you try to do that, what you'll end up doing is you'll start to see the texture in the paint along the edge of your camera. It isn't going to do what it just did for me when I showed you. And the other thing to bear in mind is it will only work if your paint is very, very thin, and if your edge is actually pretty decent in the first place. If you're trying to get a freehand edge with paint that's mixed too thickly and you're getting a heavy spattery edge, no amount of sanding, it will help, but it's not going to bring it back to a real nice edge like that. So that's just a couple of things to bear in mind, because I think sometimes I just assume people understand what I'm going on about, and you know, without wishing to offend anybody's intelligence, I think probably I should explain myself a bit better sometimes. So anyway, I'm going to leave this video here. So this was part 5, because I need to set this aside and it needs some serious drying time. I want this this gloss to be completely cured and completely dry. As it is now, it's handleable, but if I hold it too long in one place, it starts to feel sticky. So it's going to need a couple of days just to fully cure off, and then we can start messing around with the desert pink and heading towards that Gulf War finish. Almost a shame. I mean, anybody of a similar vintage to myself will be looking at this and thinking, yes, this is what RAF aircraft are supposed to look like. I can just see it with 617 lightning strikes and high-vis roundels would look ace. I'm almost tempted to build another one just to do that, but no, I said almost. I don't know if I can face this paint again. Anyway, I'll leave it there. So yeah, this is going to go to one side to cure off, and the next time you see me, the next video, part 6, is going to cover the application of the chipping fluids and the desert sand or the desert pink, whichever way you want to look at it, the chipping of it, and so on and so forth. Alright then, so I'll see you next time, and until then, look after yourselves, look after each other, and Genesis out.